Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to look at the long run Phillips curve. So the definition here of the long run Phillips curve, or LRPC, is that it's a model that shows in the long run there is no trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Okay? Now the question is, why is that the case? And then how do we draw the long run Phillips curve, and then how do we kind of manipulate it? So this time, what I'm going to do is go ahead and this time I'm going to draw it myself because I was having a little bit of an issue in the last video making these graphs work using a picture. So I'm just going to draw them myself. So that's what we're going to do. So we've got our aggregate demand curve, short run aggregate supply, and then long run aggregate supply curve, and then YF, and we've got PLF, and so there is our long run equilibrium. Now the reason that there is no trade-off between inflation and unemployment in the long run is because it has to do with long run aggregate supply. If you look at this, when we're in the long run at YF, okay, remember full employment output is associated with the natural rate of unemployment, right? When you're at full employment, you're at that 4 to 6% unemployment. So this is that 4 to 6%. And so we notice the price level can be whatever it wants. If the price level changes, meaning inflation, we're still going to be at that 4 to 6% in the long run because LRAS, it's stationary, and so inflation can change, but unemployment's going to stay right where it is at that natural rate. So what would then the long run Phillips curve look like? Well, first of all, the labels, unemployment, I apologize for my handwriting in advance, unemployment rate and inflation rate. I can't write like fast and neat. I can either write slow and neat or fast and sloppy. I can't do both. I don't know why. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be vertical, just like the long run aggregate supply curve, because it's showing that it doesn't matter what inflation is, you're still going to be at that natural rate of unemployment. And that's exactly what this label is. We'll call this UN for the natural rate of unemployment. So when the LRPC curve hits the x-axis, that's the natural rate of unemployment. That's what's associated with YF. Like these two values are connected, right? It's the output at long run and the amount of people unemployed at long run, okay? Now, what about inflation? Like, how would we show the inflation rate here? Well, this is where we can bring in the short run Phillips curve. Because where these two intersect, that is the same thing, and maybe a different color would help this. So here's a little red. That's the same thing as this point. These 2 points are the same point. And so where that extends over, that is what we're going to call IE, the expected inflation rate. Notice that's different than what we said with short run Phillips curve. With the short run Phillips curve, we said it's the actual inflation rate, wherever we happen to be. The expected inflation rate is what we would expect over the long run, what we anticipate inflation to be over the long run. When we have time to plan and adjust our actions, right? We've talked before how lenders, if they have the time, they can adjust their interest rates, i.e. increase them if there's inflation, right? However, if they can't see it coming and they're just told, here's the inflation rate, they can get burned by inflation because they don't have time to adjust. So IE is the expected inflation rate. It is the inflation rate at long run equilibrium, and it's the inflation rate when LRPC equals SRPC. Now, it also happens to be an actual inflation rate, right? Because it is a point on the short run Phillips curve, right? But it is the expected inflation rate because it's where LRPC intersects short run Phillips curve. So just make sure you understand that terminology there. With the long run Phillips curve, when it hits the x-axis, that's your natural rate of unemployment, i.e. would be the expected inflation rate. So if SRPC were to shift, So for example, if we move SRAS, so we can just kind of play around with this. If we move SRAS to the left, we know from the last video that would move SRPC to the right because now we have more inflation and more unemployment, stagflation. We notice here that's just going to move us along the Phillips curve, right? So now we're at this green point here, and this is a new IE. So notice that the expected inflation rate will change, but the natural rate of unemployment stays the same, right? So anytime you move the short run Phillips curve, you're just going to move along the long run Phillips curve. So the question is, well, then what would move the long run Phillips curve? And maybe if you've been paying really close attention, you might already know. But the answer is the only way to move this circle is to move this circle. And so the way we do that is if we can move the long run aggregate supply curve. So for example, if we move LRAS to the left, okay, that means we now have less GDP, right? Less full employment output, which means if output has fallen, remember it's an inverse, unemployment would increase. And so that's going to move LRPC to the right. Now, what's cool and nifty here in terms of memorizing rules is that LRPC and LRAS have the same relationship that SRPC and SRAS do, which is when one moves left, the other moves to the right. So that's kind of an easy way to remember that. It's just important, we'll call that UN1, it's just important that you know why, okay? Because a lot of these FRQ questions in particular are going to want you to know why, okay? So we've got a lot going on here. Obviously, they would not have you moving all of these curves at once. I'm just trying to show you as many different possibilities that there could, well, possibly be. Finally, just a little summary of what we've talked about in this video. So again, you move along the LRPC if SRPC shifts. You shift the LRPC left if LRAS shifts right. You'll shift the LRPC right if LRAS shifts left. Full employment or long-run equilibrium, another way to show that is where SRPC and the LRPC intersect. The expected inflation rate, i.e., is the long-run inflation rate found at full employment, so the intersection of SRPC and LRPC, and the natural rate of unemployment, we've already defined what that is previously, but it's the long-run unemployment rate found at full employment, and we can show it where LRPC hits the x-axis. So I think students find the Phillips curve particularly challenging because it forces you all to connect the Phillips curve graph to ADAS. And when one is moving, what's the reaction on the other one? And this just takes practice. This is something that the more you work with it, the easier it will get. But I encourage you to just do some practice problems on your own. Like say, okay, I'm going to make SRAS move left. Okay, what's that going to do to LRPC? I'm going to move AD to the right. What's that going to do to the Phillips curve graph? Practice like that will definitely help as you master this particular model. So that's all for this video on the long run Phillips curve. Until next time, have a great day.